Black Monday in the NFL. We have already seen a lot of head coaches be fired. We saw it in Cleveland. We saw it in Arizona. We saw it in Las Vegas. And that makes 6 head coach openings. Will there be one in Miami? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Tua and what he said to the media today, plus an update on the GM search because requested interviews have been reported publicly. But let's start with the head coach, Mike McDaniel. Is he returning? Well, we had a video go out this morning about how it is more likely than not that Mike McDaniel will return to Miami as head coach, but nothing has been solidified. Well, Mike McDaniel said in his end of the season press conference with Dolphins media on Monday afternoon that he will be a part of the Dolphins GM interviews and search process, which is very depressing in my opinion. And I'll explain more here in a second. But we have you covered every single day. And when the Dolphins hire a GM, we will have you covered with the news. So subscribe today. We're 110 away from 79.2 thousand. Let's get there today. This is what Mike McDaniel said. And this is the part where it's just so puzzling to me because it's like really conflicting in my opinion. And this is like the story of the entire Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel era in Miami. When asked if he's going to be back next year, which is a question you have to ask, but it's a dumb question because if he knew the answer to it, he wouldn't be speaking to the media. But he said that his understanding is I'm the Dolphins head coach until I'm told otherwise. But also said when referring to the GM search process that he will be a part of the process. He won't have the decision. Stephen Ross will make final decision, but McDaniel will be a part of it. And the only way that you can read this, in my opinion, is that Mike McDaniel will be back in 2026, which absolutely stinks. I have been the leader in the clubhouse. If you think someone has wanted Mike McDaniel fired more or before me, you're wrong. Because I wanted him fired in December of 2024 when it was his first bad season. But I just realized this guy is never going to get it done in Miami. I wanted him fired. That didn't happen. And now everybody jumped on board during the 2025 absolute collapse. He needs to go. He's not a good head coach. He is 4-21 in challenges. Terrible game management, consistent procedural issues, 4-11 with a quarterback not named Tua. So for the people out there that says, let him get a real quarterback, still not good with anybody else other than Tua. And the second half, worst third quarter team in the NFL this season, the Miami Dolphins were. Horrible. They got outscored 21-0 in the second half. They got outscored 14-0 in the third quarter 3 separate times this season. They were a bottom 5 second half team in football this year. He needs to go. But with McDaniel saying that about the GM, Ian Rappaport saying on NFL Network today that Mike McDaniel is expected to be back with the Miami Dolphins, but it is not solidified, it is not finalized. I mean, I think we can basically do that. Us as fans, us as content creators can come out and say, yes, even if it is not announced by Dolphins ownership that McDaniel's back in 2026, based on the insiders, based on what McDaniel said, he's going to be back here next season, which is an incredible disappointment, and I think it is a major, major mistake. What say you? You guys chime in. Is it a mistake to keep Mike McDaniel as head coach of the Miami Dolphins? Y for yes or N for no. Let's move on from Mike McDaniel, get to Tua, because this guy is just unbelievable. Asked in the locker room if he wants to be somewhere else and have a fresh start. He literally said that would be dope. I would be good with it. That he was asked to make sure you know that means with a different team that isn't the Miami Dolphins. And he said, yes, I know that. Get this guy all away from me. I can't stand him. I'm sorry. He changed. I have never seen, we've seen players in coaches in sports, whether it's the NFL, NBA, MLB, hockey, it doesn't really matter. Get paid a big-time extension, big-time contract, and mail it in. Has anyone done it recently in such a stark manner more than Tua? He got extended before the 2024 season and then immediately starts being a douche in the media. That's just how it is. And declines in play. goodbye. Like, I don't want to see you, dude. Like, and I understand it. I really do, because it's the right answer, right? Like, you ask him, do you want to be somewhere else where you can actually maybe get away from Miami, get a fresh start, and just kind of clear your head? Yeah, you should absolutely want that if you're Tua. But the point I'm trying to make is you don't say it to the media. He is one of the worst media trained people I've ever seen. He is just consistently, time after time after time, saying the absolute wrong thing, the opposite of what he should be saying. And that's why I'm excited to get him out of here. Not only the decline in play, but that as well. So the Dolphins have two options. They can either cut him pre-June 1st, or they can cut him post-June 1st. No one is going to trade for Tua. I can guarantee that. So if Miami wants him off the roster, going to have to cut him prior to June 1st or after June 1st. And when we talk about that, we certainly will have to look at the differences in the contracts, because if he's cut prior to June 1st, has a $99 million dead cap. 99. You actually lose savings in the cap. Negative $42.8 million. So your cap bill goes up by $42.8 million in 2026 if you cut him prior to June 1st. But what it does is it gives you max savings in 2027. I mean, you can look at the difference right now. It's a difference of $32 million. You either can cut him post June 1st and spread it out between 2026 and 2027. So you lower the cap hit this year, but you have more dead cap for Tua in 2027. Or you take it all in now and set yourself up for more flexibility in 2027, which I'm actually in the favor of the pre-June 1st. I know it would create a lot of difficulties for Miami fielding a good roster in 2026, because they simply just wouldn't have cap space to add enough high-level talent outside of the organization that is currently in the building and in the draft. But I don't care, because Miami's not going to compete next year. But there is a chance they compete in 2027 if they're able to find the right quarterback and make the right signings in free agency with all of the savings they would have if they cut to a pre-June 1st. So I know it's a risky move to set an NFL record in dead cap by cutting him prior to June 1st, basically right now. But I would do it. No matter what, though, he's gone. That is clear. He will not be on the Dolphins roster in 2026, no matter who is GM, no matter who is head coach. It's just a matter of how they ultimately divvy up his cap hit and the dead cap. And I'm all for getting rid of it all in 2026, giving you more flexibility in 2027. Not going to spend too much time on this, but before we get into the GM interview requests and updates, Anthony Weaver was requested for a head coach interview from the Atlanta Falcons. They fired Raheem Morris on Sunday evening. It is the first time we've seen Weaver get requested to interview as a head coach. Remember, he was a finalist for the Saints job last year. He interviewed with the Bears as well. If he were to leave and get a head coaching job around the NFL somewhere, Miami would get 2 third-round comp picks, one in 2026, one in 2027, due to the Rooney Rule, because as a minority head coach, getting that upgrade, he spent 2 years in Miami and then gets upgraded to a head coaching role. So that is something certainly to monitor. If he interviews any other spot for a head coach, we will let you know. But we are brought to you by Prize Picks. That is who sponsors today's show. Appreciate them. And yes, your fantasy football season is over, but you can still get in on the action. No draft required every week to play fantasy football. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stat projections, your favorite players, and when they hit, you can cash in. New year, new routine, and you might want to get in on daily fantasy, and the action never stops, and Prize Picks lets you take control. I got an entry already in for Wild Card Weekend, this upcoming weekend, and I'm going more than on Drake May passing yards. I think that is a really good matchup for him personally against the Chargers defense that plays the second most zone defense in the Professional Football League. And then more than DJ Moore rushing yards, more than Colson Luffin touchdown in that Packers-Bears game. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Other than the Mike McDaniel and Tua quotes today, the Dolphins did send out official requests for GM interviews. The initial list was 6. Now, as you're watching this, there might be more people that have been reported, but these are the 6 as of filming our show. Josh Williams, the 49ers director of scouting, Alec Halaby, the Eagles assistant GM, John McKay, the Rams assistant GM, Jon-Eric Sullivan, the Packers vice president of player personnel, Tariq Ahmad, the 49ers vice president of player personnel, and RJ Gillen, the 49ers assistant GM. So yes, 3 Niners executives mixed in with Sullivan, Halaby, and John McKay. And by the way, just quick plug, this is why you follow me on Twitter. I sent this out at 8:20 Central Time, so 9:20 Eastern Time, that I expect Chad Alexander, Josh Williams, Alec Halaby, John McKay, and Jon-Eric Sullivan to be interviewed and be among the top candidates for Miami. And, well, I still think Chad Alexander gets interviewed, by the way, but I'm shooting 4 or 5 on my initial list there. And I also want to note, it is being reported that this will not be a long, drawn-out process. Miami had a head start knowing they were going to need to hire a GM because they fired Chris Greer on October 31st, and they've already had some names in mind. I think these 6 are among them. And I believe that Miami will really work through this interview process swiftly, and I think they'll hire a GM before Sunday. I do. I mean, I've heard that it could happen as soon as Friday and have Zoom interviews today, on Monday, Tuesday, in-person interviews on Wednesday and Thursday, with a potential hiring on Friday. Now, that is really, really quick, but that is the hope. Miami hopes to be blown away by one of these candidates in the next 72 hours to where they can confidently say, all right, let's hire him as GM on Friday. And if you were to ask me who my top candidates are inside of those 6 reported candidates are in terms of them being interviewed, these are the 3. In order, by the way. Jon-Eric Sullivan, number 1. VP of player personnel for the Packers. I've got John McKay, the assistant GM for the Rams, at number 2. And I've got Josh Williams, the 49ers director of scouting and pro personnel, at number 3. And I'm not going to go in depth on all 3. We'll do that on a video going out tomorrow morning, so stay tuned for that. But I wanted to briefly talk about why Jon-Eric Sullivan is my top guy. He's 50 years old. He's been inside the Packers front office for over 20 years. He comes from that legendary Packers tree in that front office led by Ron Wolf that has elite-level executives across the league. He interviewed for all 4 GM vacancies last offseason. It was the Titans, Jets, Raiders, and Jaguars who all had an opening. And I know some people are going to say, well, he interviewed for all 4 and didn't get any of them. Is that a red flag on him? Certainly is a possibility, and we'll see how he interviews with Miami. But it could just be bad franchises, and all 4 of those usually are, making poor decisions. Now, the Jaguars did nail theirs, as Gladstone is absolutely cooking in Jacksonville. But if we look at Sullivan's roles in Green Bay over the last 20 years, I think we should start in 2008. Because remember what we have said. The Dolphins are prioritizing and looking for a GM with a very strong scouting background. That is one of their goals, one of the things they want to see in their next GM. Well, Sullivan was a scout for damn near a decade, right? Central Plains scout for 3 years, Southeast scout for 3 years, director of college scouting for 2 years, then gets promoted to co-director of player personnel before becoming the VP of player personnel, where he's held that position for the last 3 seasons. I really do believe he checks all of the boxes Miami has been looking for, and he checks all the boxes that I'm looking for. He's almost like the anti-Chris Greer, if we're going to be honest. He builds through the draft. I mean, just listen to this quote that he had a couple years ago in an interview kind of segment with Packers media. I've always been taught the draft is your lifeblood, if you will. You build through the draft. It's a young man's game. You want to make sure you're acquiring young, talented players that fit your culture. And I think you supplement that through free agency. I think you always have to be addressing your quarterback situation, making sure you have a trigger man that you can win with, And I think you have to identify your core players within your team at all levels, your difference makers, your starters, your role guys, and the guys that are really good within their role and fit your culture. I think you have to do everything within your possibility to retain these players and make sure you're keeping that together so you can have sustained success over time. We'll ultimately see what transpires this week while the Dolphins are interviewing people for GM. I just simply don't know how you read that quote, you hear me read that quote off, and you aren't immediately fired up about the idea of him becoming the next Dolphins GM. Because I mentioned it. What was Chris Grier in his biggest thing as GM in his 10 years? Making big-time trades and making bold decisions in free agency. They didn't draft well. They had a couple good drafts for sure. Waddle, Jalen Phillips, good draft there. But I can't confidently say he was a good drafting GM, and he made trades for Tariq Hill, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Ramsey. Like, he would go outside the building and try to just put a lot of talent together and see if it sticks. Well, the truth is, the most talented team in the NFL doesn't always win. The team that has a good mix of talent with culture, stability, technique, and the right coaches, with an elite quarterback, of course, those are the team that win. And I think Jon-Eric Sullivan knows that, understands that, and would be a great GM in the NFL, which is why he's my number one guy. But we'll have you updated throughout the entire GM process for the Miami Dolphins, whether it is 1 week, whether it's 2 weeks. So make sure you subscribe, turn on your notifications so you don't miss anything we tell you.